back.
Yeah, crystal
All
clear.
right. Thank you guys for bearing with us. We had some technical difficulties, but we are back. So, Andre, I know that you kind of talked about Everson Griffin as well as, I believe, Aqib Talib. So, if you can, I think we got most of it, but if you can, just give kind of a brief summary of what we could look forward to signing those guys for. And then I guess we can start to get into some of the Bengals' internal contracts.
But hold on, really quick. Let me interject something with you, Andre. I want to make sure that this is clear. There is no way that I would be on board with an $8 to $10 million deal with either one of those guys. But if they're like based on the numbers you just told me, right? If we're starting at 24, we got 7.5 that comes off of the cap number.
That's right.
With the current Bengals rookies deals, right? I just want to think like if I took a deal like a Alexander McKenzie, like a 1 year, 4 year, something like that would be like more manageable. How does that relate to that cap hit at that point?
Yeah, so that would be much more manageable. I agree. If they get a Mackenzie Alexander, and by the way, Mackenzie Alexander is my him and Von Bell are my favorite signings of this class. Just from I love DJ Reader, of course, but just and Trey Waynes, I think gets a bad rap, but I think Trey's a better player than a lot of people give him credit for. But Mackenzie Alexander and Von Bell are my favorite signings because of the value there. They got Mackenzie on a 1 year, $4 million deal, and so I think. If you can get a Talib like that, in that range, obviously I think that would be doable and much more agreeable. And I want to reiterate that point too. I'm glad you said that, Zim. I'm not advocating for signing those guys at those types of deals. I'm just saying that if the market usually plays out, there may be a team considering how well those guys have played and how much I think they have left in the tank. I think there's going to be a team that just values them because of the positions they play. Those guys tend to be paid higher. But it wouldn't surprise me. Mackenzie Alexander, too, is also a nickel corner, and those guys don't get – that market is slow to develop. It's not as advanced as the outside guys.
That's very true.
But I love Mackenzie Alexander. But if you can get him to keep Talib at a 1 year, $5 million, $4 million deal, yeah, for sure. I have to look into this. Talib also, I think, played on the LA Rams. I don't know if his time with the Rams overlapped with Taylor's time. So I don't know if there's a connection there. Obviously, different sides of the ball, so I'm not sure if that would really matter. But – but they're in the same locker room, and Zach would know, Coach Taylor would know what kind of player and teammate Talib has been. But by all accounts, Talib's been a great teammate on all the teams he's played for, and been a hard worker, and teams really like him. He's been a leader. I think he was captain when he was with the Broncos. I remember the C logo on his chest, on his jersey. Yeah. But I would, if Aqib Talib, you can never have enough corners. I love the corner position. I think it's the most important on defense. If he's agreeable to that type of deal, for sure, I'd be all for it. I think that's great value. But yeah, I mean, and again, the lower those cap hits, the easier it is to digest on the Bengals cap because, while they, again, $16.5 million left over, you can throw on another guy, $8 million, sure, but then that cuts it in half already. And with the way the Bengals like to roll over money in the following year and then the extensions that they got to get done, even though that really won't add that much to the cap, especially with AJ Green, and we can talk about that later. But I think, anything around a $5 million type deal is a sweet spot for the Bengals, whether that's Larry Warford, whether that's Aqib Talib, whether that's Everson Griffin. I like Cameron Wake, and he's got ties to Lou Anarumo. Cameron is a great player. He's older now. I think he's almost 40. But that guy is a physical specimen. That guy he's a freak. I mean, he doesn't come off the field. I mean, he doesn't play 100% of the snaps, but he doesn't miss games. He's at 38 years old, and he's had a career where, knock on wood, he just hasn't missed a lot of time. And those are the types of players you want. Those guys that lead by example, but more importantly, they're still good players. And I think when we talked about our lack of depth on the edge, bring in a Cameron Wake type of deal. I also like, just because I remember watching him closely in Detroit, Ziggy Ansah is still available.
Yes. Yep. I like Ziggy.
I like Ziggy. Ziggy's got some injuries history. He's got some serious injuries with his back. But Ziggy, I think, signed late in the year last year with Seattle. I think he played against the Bengals week 1. I think the reason I say 1 year, $8 million for like Everson Griffin is I think that's the deal Ziggy Ansah signed last year with the Seahawks was 1 year, $8 million. And it was later in the offseason. So that's how I kind of pigeonhole or kind of peg.
That's it. That seems more like a Super Bowl contender type money right there.
That's true. It's true. So I would like you said, edge depth, Kevin Wake is one of them. There's also Marcus Golden, former relatively high pick for Arizona, then with the Giants. But I like Marcus Golden. Marcus Golden could be, as an edge rusher, an edge rush specialist. Who would have thought like Shaq Barrett last year with the Bucks? Shaq Barrett was in line for defensive MVP. He got a franchise tag this year.
Right.
Hurts that we were supposed to sign him too.
Yeah. And the Bengals pulled out of that.
They did. The
Bengals were the one. Yep. Yeah, the Bengals pulled out of that one, which is crazy. So
yeah. But the point about Shaq Barrett is nobody would have thought Shaq Barrett would have gone in and places and killed it out there. And he balled out, and he balled out all year.
Shaq Barrett this year kind of reminds me of like a little bit of how the fan base is kind of. I think a lot of fan base are probably like 30-40% of the fan base was kind of like Shaq Barrett, and then when he came into the building, I think a lot more fan base was on board with that. It reminds me a lot of Darren Lee this year.
Yeah,
like there's a huge portion of the fan base that is looking for Darren Lee. For me, I just thought Everson Griffin with just the mentality like him with Carlos. I just saw that a lot better. I wouldn't be mad at any of those guys from a depth position. It's not my money, but that's why we're talking to you because you make the money make sense, I guess. But it's not my money, and I'm not one of those people that tell people how to spend their money. But if we're talking money on the GOAT, AJ Green, what is an ideal spot? Because I've heard rumors at 18 million, I've heard 12 million, I've heard all types of stuff that like doesn't make sense to me. What is an ideal contract for AJ Green, who would be turning 32?
Yep, 32.
Yeah, he was born in 88.
Bet. Yeah. Okay. So AJ Green, tell me what that contract probably looks like and how it relates to maybe someone. I guess he always gets linked to Julio, but I don't. Yeah. I guess that's probably what AJ Green is looking at, right?
Yeah, I think same draft class, 2011. Julio was picked 2 picks behind him. The Falcons came all the way up in that trade in Cleveland to come get Julio, and their careers are kind of parallel. Although Julio stayed a little bit more healthy than AJ has. Although the same with Carl, I think AJ's injuries have been just a little bit bad luck. Well, a lot of it, especially last year up in Dayton at the field turf. What a horrible situation. They should have never been on that field. And the reality is, too, AJ probably could have played last year. And I'll never say he's dogging it. I don't care what he did. But I agree with AJ. He's looking at it like, we're a 2-14 team. I'm not going to go out there and play with this team. Right. And it's a contract year. I don't blame AJ. I'm decidedly pro player. Obviously, I love the team, but I don't fault AJ. He probably, if the Bengals towards the end of the year entered December, 4 games left. So let's say they were 10-2. AJ Green was probably playing last year, because he's like, okay, I'm healed enough, but there was no way he was going to risk further injury. I don't blame him for that. And so people say, well, he missed all last year, but he could have played if he really wanted to. He probably was cleared. And so, but I don't fault him for not. So the injury concerns are valid. I will say they're valid, but AJ Green is the consummate professional. He takes care of his body. He's a true professional in terms of he loves his craft. He says he wants to play another 4 or 5 years. I have no reason to doubt that. And I don't doubt that it will be at a high level. And in fact, I don't doubt that AJ Green is hearing all these things that, he's washed up or he's over the hill, like he's not the same AJ. AJ Green, hopefully with Joe Burrow, I think AJ Green, I mean, this may be the hot take of hot takes. He may be in line, I think, because I've always liked AJ as a player and his skills, like an MVP type of season. I'm not talking about the team MVP, and I'm not saying it's going to be this year, but Jerry Rice won a couple MVPs with some MVP caliber quarterbacks. It's not uncommon for a wide receiver to ball out and be in consideration for an MVP discussion. And I really think AJ's motivated to show these people, look, I'm still AJ Green. I may be a year older, I've had these injuries, but give me some competent quarterback play. Right. Andy Dalton the last couple of years was average at best. Ryan Finley is a backup. I know he didn't play with Ryan Finley, but give AJ a Joe Burrow, and AJ doesn't need that type of. He can. I mean, look what he did with Andy Dalton.
Right.
And I like Andy Dalton, but Andy Dalton is middle of the pack as you come in terms of quarterback play. And so I like AJ Green to the point of his extension. I do think I was a lot more optimistic about a couple weeks ago, but now we're less than a month away from the deadline that he has until July 15th. I'll say maybe I'll give it about a 65% chance it gets done. And just because of his age, I think the team would like, and based on the contracts they gave out this year, I think they would like the sweet spot to be about a 3-year extension. So they would just cut up the franchise year, which is this year, and just do a 3-year extension for 2020, 2021, and 2022. That gives AJ through his age 34 season, and I'd be comfortable with that. You know, he's in great shape.
Right.
He's going to take care of his body, and it's 2020. Athletes can take care of their bodies better than they could in a generation ago, even.
Right.
And so I would be comfortable. I'm not sure if the Bengals would do this, but I would be comfortable giving AJ. Honestly, people think $18 million a year. I'd be comfortable with $20 million a year just to guarantee a service. So here's my contract proposal for AJ Green: 3 years, $60 million. With about half of it guaranteed. The Bengals don't guarantee anything outside of the signing bonus, but they'll give a pretty good signing bonus, like they gave Reader, like they gave Trey Waynes. And so people will say $20 million a year for 30.
Right.
But here's the deal: don't look at
how do we structure it? Come on.
You look at the structure, and then you look at it. The metric I like to use is a percentage of the cap, because it's not like people look and say $20 million a year. Oh my God, they clutch the pearls. It's like the cap wasn't the cap that it was last year. It wasn't the cap that it was 5 years ago. And so if you do $20 million on the salary cap this year, which is $198.2 million, that's 10%. It's about 10.1% of the cap. AJ's extension, when he signed it in 2015, the day before they flew out to Oakland, remember the 2015 opener, he got that extension. It was a 4-year, $60 million extension, so $15 million a year. But the cap then was $143. So $15 million on a 143 cap was still 10.4%. And so the percentage of the cap is not different. So people will almost have heart attacks. $20 million a year. But look at it. Look what the salary cap is. Now the cap, we may talk about this. The cap next year may go down and may be adjusted because of the virus. And there may be no fans in the stands, and that may take a hit. But the way the NFL revenues are going, and that they will be outside of this pandemic, the NFL revenues are just going through the roof. And so the salary caps are going to go up. So that $20 million on this year's cap is only 10% of the cap. And then next year, it's going to be even less as a percentage of the cap, assuming it goes up. So the point of me saying that is admittedly, that is on the high end. I will give you that. But I would do that in order to just say, AJ, we really love you. We want you. We appreciate everything that you've done for us this last decade. But contracts aren't really a reward for what you've done in the past. They're really a projection of the value you're going to bring going forward. And I feel comfortable saying that a contract that gives him 10% of the cap, so whether that's $20 million a year, which it would be in this case, I think that's still value to the Bengals. I mean, he's a bona fide number one target that can play. You can even put AJ in the slot. You can put him at the X, the Z. I mean, you can line him up, as you guys well know better than I do in that regard. But I do that as a way of saying, AJ, yes, this is an appreciation of everything you've done. But 2, we really value you at this much, and we want to get a deal done. I don't want to nickel and dime my best player on offense. I don't want to nickel and dime a guy who prior to last year was on a trajectory to be in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
The Bengals, I mean, Ken Riley, rest in peace, rest his soul, should be in the Hall of Fame. Kenny Anderson too, but we only have one. We got Anthony Munoz. I know Mike Brown views these types of things, and AJ Green was on a firm trajectory to be a Hall of Fame player. And because of that, I think AJ can get back on course. And because of that, I just don't want to mess around. I don't want to do another Andrew Whitworth thing like, hey, we're going to lowball you and go to the market, see what they say, and then come back to us.
Right. It's not going to – it wouldn't work in their favor. I've told people, too, if he plays this year on that franchise tag, he's gone.
Yep.
I can't see a scenario where him coming back. I really don't.
I wouldn't shut the door. I agree that he's gone, and 95% chance. I agree. If I were a betting person, I would bet money that he leaves if he plays on the tag, because there is a team that would pay him. But I don't want to mess around. AJ Green is our franchise player. I mean, Burrow now too, but Burrow hasn't played it down. And I think he'll be great, hopefully. But AJ Green, you know what he is. And
how many more weeks do they have before they have to make that decision? Isn't it about 2 more weeks from now, or the beginning of July? I think I sit down. Okay, July 15th.
So what's the 17th? They got less than a month. But
I feel like this is a bad movie plan over again.
Yeah, I know. What do you think, Ace? What do you think? So, admittedly, I'll end on this on AJ. I do think that my proposal is 3 years, $60 million. And I think a lot of people say, oh, 20 million, that's a lot. But like I've said, if you view that as a percentage of the cap, it's very reasonable. It's only 10.1% of the cap. Very reasonable. And I think that says AJ say, okay, I'm not going to play around anymore. These guys are showing they value me, and I'll sign this deal. And I would be so happy. I think a lot of fans who don't understand would say, oh, 20 million is an overpay. And you'd always have those people on Twitter and everything. Hey, he's an old. I think AJ Green, especially this year and maybe even next year, is on a mission to prove people wrong, to prove people that he's still one of the top receivers in the game. And I truly believe he is. What do you think about him, Ace?
I have to agree with you on that, Andre. I think number one, it just sends the wrong message if you lowball the guy. And then number two, like you said, even though it's 20 million, it's not necessarily 20 million. Like a lot of those bonuses, like you said, could be tied into the Bengals making the playoffs, making the Super Bowl, him winning MVP. There's all kind of enhancements that you can put in there to at least kind of dress it up and make it look like it's 20 million a year. I also think, like you said, that he's definitely not going to be a guy that's slowing down. I think he models his game after Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald is still playing now. And I think, like you said, he's a classy guy, and you want to sustain some kind of culture and show respect to players, especially for this guy coming to the Bengals, not giving up on them. I think that is the perfect situation, like you said, to go out there and give him that 3-year deal. And I think 3 years, like you said, is the perfect spot for it. And I think, like you guys also said, if he doesn't get that and he does have to play on a franchise deal, he's probably gone.
I agree.
Right. I think one of the arguments that I had, I guess, against it was, okay, they've invested a lot in the wide receiver position. How this plays out or how they see their vision for T. Higgins, I don't know if they're waiting to see what he looks like, how fast he's picking up the offense or whatever. I don't know if that's a big thing. But I guess my final question on the AJ Green thing is, if you did a $20 million deal, what does the cap space look like at that point?
Yeah.
Like what is that number that we now just got down to, what, 13 or 14 mil or something?
Yeah, 16.5. Yep.
16.5. Okay. So now what does that number look like?
Good question. So AJ's on the franchise tag that he hasn't actually signed it yet, but if he does sign it and they don't do a deal, his cap hit will be 17.865. So almost just under 18 million. So the way they'll structure a deal, if they get a deal done by the July 15th deadline, because he's already at 18 million, what they'll do is they'll give him a huge signing bonus, maybe even a $20 million signing bonus and a very small base salary. But that $20 million signing bonus can be divided by the length of the contract. So you would divide it, you pay him the money, he gets that money, but from a cap perspective, you divide that 20 million by the 3 years of the deal. So it's a little over 7 or whatever 20 divided by 3 is. Not quite 7, whatever it is, in terms of the cap hit. So his cap hit could very well actually go down. In fact, most teams do it that way. Once you're on a franchise tag, you do a new deal, and because you prorate the signing bonus, it actually ends up lowering the cap hit as compared to what would have been had the guy been on the salary cap. So the Bengals can structure it. The Bengals don't always do that with their franchise players, but the way they could structure it could actually lead to his cap hit being less this year, clearing cap space. But if they wanted to do it, let's say if they want to do it clean, so he's already at 17.865 for the franchise tag. If they just wanted to do a 3-year, $60 million deal and have every year cap hit be 20 million, well, that's only adding about 2.2 million to the cap because he's already counting for 17.8. So now you're only adding, and they won't do it that way, by the way. So if AJ Green's cap goes to 20 million, he's already at 17.8. So that's only 2.2 million adding. So you take that 2.2 million out of that 16.5. Now you're down to 14.5. You still got plenty of room. You still got plenty of room to sign Joe Mixon. I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but the Joe Mixon.
No, this is good stuff.
It'll segue with Joe Mixon will be a little different in the sense that his cap number this year will actually go up a little bit because he's getting paid on a rookie deal. Whereas AJ is on the franchise tag, he's already at a high cap number. And again, not to repeat myself, but you can structure that in a way where you can actually have his cap be virtually the same. So there's no net effect on the team cap, or you can actually reduce his salary cap. So you actually increase the team cap room, by the way, depending on how they do the signing bonus. But with Joe Mixon, I like Joe, and I like the way he plays. I like his passion. I think he's a team leader. And in fact, he was the only guy who, if you watch claims closely enough towards the end of the season, that was him and Tyler Boyd. I always remember the play Tyler Boyd had in that Dolphins game where he looked like he pulled his hammy. And it looked like on any other play, and any other player, a guy would have been laying down, but Tyler had the wherewithal to get up and lined up on the line. I think the next play was a spike to kill the clock.
Yeah, because had he not, the clock, would have kept going.
Yep. I've always respected Tyler Boyd. I mean, we can forgive him because he's from the Pittsburgh area. He's probably grew up as a Steeler fan, but we can forgive him for that. But that guy is a baller. That guy balls out and he plays hard. And in football, you need guys like that. And Joe Mixon the reason I mentioned Tyler is Joe Mixon fits that bill. Joe Mixon plays, he wears his emotions on his sleeve, but in a good way. And players follow him. He's a leader by example. But
with that said, though, hold on now. With that said, now I want to find out what side of the fence are you on? Are you a pay-to-running back type of guy, or are you a guy that doesn't see the value in the position? Because all that you just said sounded really good, and it's got tremendous value, and the average fan says, "Pay that man." Yeah.
So I when I look on the analytics of it, I agree with I think, and this is taking nothing away from Joe Mixon or any running back really. I think, though, running back is probably the most fungible position, most interchangeable position in football. And that's not to say the running game is still important. Obviously, I think the passing game sets up the run, but the running game is still important. But I still think, as the Broncos showed in the late 90s, whether it was Terrell Davis or Gary Anderson or Mike Anderson or the other guy that they had,
or Landis Gary or something.
Yeah. So like those guys, even Terrell Davis, Hall of Famer, was a 6th-round pick. So you don't have to be. In fact, Kajana Carter, I leapt for joy when they traded up for Kajana Carter. The best running back in that class was Curtis Martin, who I also liked. He played at University of Pittsburgh, and he's a Hall of Famer. And he was a 3rd round. He went in the 3rd round in that '95 draft. So the point of that saying is, look, Travion Williams. Did Travion Williams get one handoff last year? I don't think he had one handoff.
Barely played, yeah.
Preseason.
In the regular season, I think he was inactive most games.
Right.
Rodney Anderson, there was an article on Bengals.com. I mean, God bless him. He's only, who knows? I mean, I can't imagine the stuff he's gone through with tearing his knees and tearing it last year. But I still have hopes for Rodney Anderson.
Same.
And, Gio Bernard, we can talk about potential cap casualties. I know they won't cut Gio, and I like him. But the Bengals already have a considerable amount invested in the running back position. And they don't even really know what they have with Travion and Rodney Anderson. And so to answer your question, I wouldn't sign Joe Mixon to the contract that I would propose. And I actually think this deal gets done before AJ because there is no deadline on this deal. There's no July 15th deadline that's imposed by the CBA. They can get this deal done a day before the season starts, during the season, anytime. Although if it gets to the season, I'm sure Mixon won't want to talk about contracts as a distraction. But I think the Bengals are probably going to do like a 4-year, $40 million deal with Joe. And that's $10 million a year. And I think that's fair. I think he takes that. I think, it puts him in the top 6 running backs overall. But I wouldn't do that just because I want to allocate those resources to maybe an Everson Griffin. I mean, by the way, you can do both of these. You can sign Mixon to a 4-year, $40 million, and then sign like an Everson Griffin or a Larry Warford. It doesn't prevent you from doing that. But I would allocate my resources to positions other than running back. If it were me, I would just have running backs on rookie contracts. Because I don't know if he wants that. What's the guy?
The Christian McCaffrey money.
McCaffrey, great player. McCaffrey, and although Mixon, I think, doesn't get the credit that he deserves as a receiver, McCaffrey really plays 2 positions. He caught like 80 balls or something. I think Joe Mixon could be just as good as a receiver as Christian.
The way, and this kind of goes with your AJ Green sentiment that you said. You said, hey, look, I think he could have an MVP caliber season, right?
I do.
The only reason why I would caution that, the same way I would say Joe Mixon's opportunities in the pass game is, unlike a lot of teams like the Carolina Panthers or whatever, they just have so many wide receiver options to me that I don't think AJ Green sees that amount of balls, and I don't think Joe Mixon would see that much in the pass game. And even on 3rd down, they always looked at Joe Mixon almost like a liability in the pass blocking game. Yeah. So they sent Gio Bernard out for a lot of passes. So they kind of limit like what he could do, opposed to like, let's say he was on the Browns and he got the carries that the Nick Chubb would have got, or let's say he was on the Panthers, he definitely would see we'd be talking 13, 14 million for Mixon easy. I don't think he'll ever maximize his potential here in Cincinnati, in my opinion. But unless we're talking about a playoff caliber team and like he's just, like ready to go fourth quarter, I don't see that for like a Le'Veon Bell type situation for him ever with the amount of weapons that this team already has.
That's fair. I agree. If everybody stays healthy, our wide receiver room was stacked. I think the tight ends, I mean, who knows with Drew Sample? I like CJ. I think he's a little underrated. Drew Sample is just a giant question mark. And you got Sethan Carter and the other kid, Mason Shrek, who are just – I mean, Sethan has played well in his kind of H-back role, but I don't know if you can really count on him, and you can't really count on Mason Shrek. But we do have weapons, to your point, Zim. We got a lot of weapons. And so, yeah, if you view it for – you know what? I think the team is probably making those arguments as a way to either avoid signing them or saying, here's our price point and we're not going to budge from it because of age or running back value. But also, I think, Zim, they're probably making the point you're making now, which I hadn't even thought of. Like, okay, fine, we really want you here, but look at all these other guys we have. And they're going to get the ball too. So we can't justify paying you. I think that's a team argument that they'll make, but I do think the value certainly – would I be upset if Joe Mixon gets a four-year 40? No, I'd be happy for him, obviously, and I'd be happy for the Bengals. I think he's a good player. But I just don't know if the value is there because ultimately with these running back contracts, what ends up happening is a year or two into them – you can always get out of them too, but a year or two into them, it's, man, this is a really bad deal. And then you look back and say those first 2 years where we really paid him, was it really worth it? In other words, could a running back on like a rookie contract given us that same production at that cost? And I think that's the balance they're trying to strike with those guys.
Not to play devil's advocate, but also the elephant in the room is William Jackson III is in the last year of his contract coming up after this season.
Yep.
If you had the choice, it seems like you were thinking from a running back perspective, you want to give that to a premium position. Premium position is cornerback. The Bengals happen to have a very good one in William Jackson III. What does an extension look like, and what's the likelihood that they could get something done with William Jackson III as opposed to Joe Mixon?
I think they're going to. I don't think they'll get an extension done with WJ3 this year. Although they can. He's on his fifth-year option. I think the priorities are Mixon and AJ, and then I think a distant third is William Jackson, who I like. And if given the choice, gun to the head, given the choice, obviously they'd be different deals, but you can only sign one between Joe Mixon and William Jackson. Again, I love Joe Mixon, but just from a positional value and the way I view William Jackson, I would sign William Jackson. I would take that 10 times out of 10, even if I'm making William Jackson the highest paid corner, if he like balls out and plays at an all pro level, which I think he could this year. Just because of the positional value of cornerback. And we have seen when William Jackson III is playing to his potential, he is a true lockdown, shutdown corner. He really is. He kind of struggled a little bit last year. He's kind of been inconsistent, but I haven't lost any faith in the fact that I think that William Jackson can still be a dominant corner. And to me, you pay dominant corners. I don't know if he'll get Byron Jones money. Byron Jones signed for what, like 16 and a half. It was well over 80 million total with the Dolphins. I don't know if he's going to get
and a boatload of guaranteed.
Boatload of guarantees, almost over 40 million guarantees. So over half of his deal was guaranteed. So Jones got a good deal in Miami, and there's no state income tax in Florida, so even better for him. Yeah, but I think they do get a deal done with William Jackson. I think this deal gets done though next year. I think it gets done before free agency. Although at that point, William.
That's what I'm worried about. So if you let William Jackson, if you don't sign him this year, it seems like you kind of have leverage right now to do it right now, right? Because he's not the best season. But if William Jackson, like you just said, gets to that free agent market, can the Bengals even match what someone on the free agent market is going to give him?
Probably not. But they still have the franchise tag in their back pocket. And so if William Jackson balls out as an all-pro level, they will not let William Jackson hit the open market. As a pro player advocate, I hate the franchise tag because, I mean, it limits players. It's good for the teams, obviously, but, I mean, William Jackson could get paid a lot more on the open market if he goes in the open market, but there's no way that they'll let him hit the open. If he balls out, or even if he has a better year this year that he had last year, they're going to want to keep him around. And if they don't come to a deal, they're going to slap the franchise tag on him because he's playing now under the fifth-year option. So, but I think – the Bengals, what I've seen now, they're getting away from these 5-year type of deals, 5-year type extensions. They're doing more of these 4, maybe even 3. But Jackson's a young guy, so I think maybe a 4-year extension. And, if you want to do 4 years, 16 million, that's 64, maybe bump it up to 16.25 and give him 65 million over 4. So 4 years, 65 million with call it 32 million of that guaranteed via a big signing bonus. And even though they don't guarantee base salary, the Bengals are going to cut the guy in year 1 or 2. Even if he plays like crap, they're not going to cut him. So those act like what I like to call as effective guarantees. And there's a way to get it done. I think William Jackson, the third one, he's a first round pick. The Bengals, if you're a good first round pick, the Bengals like to get you to their second contract. That third contract, like with Whitworth, or actually that was his fourth contract, that's a different story. But if you're a rookie on the Bengals and you play well in your rookie deal, they want to keep you around. And they'll pay you. They'll pay up. And I really think that's the ultimate end game with William Jackson, because I really think he's going to end up signing an extension, but I don't think it's going to happen until next year, because there is a risk, like we just mentioned, Ace. They can let him get to the open market, but I don't think they do. I think they would franchise him and just kind of work a deal out that way. But I would say anywhere in the 4 year, 65 to maybe even pushing 70 million on an extension, because assuming he plays well, because it's a position of value and he's a great player if he ends up playing well. Right. One case scenario, if he just is sleepwalking through the year, he just doesn't look like the guy he looked like in 2017. Remember that pick six he had against Aaron Rodgers in that game? I jumped off my couch watching that game.
Remember his play on Antonio Brown every single time that we played.
Yes. Yep. He shut him down. I think they find a way to get William Jackson back in the fold. But if for some reason he just falls off a cliff this year, I think that's the only way that the Bengals don't get him back. Where he falls off a cliff and the Bengals say, hey, go on the open market, and we really are really low on you now, and we're not even going to franchise you. I don't see that happening, but that's the only way that would happen, is if he just totally bombs this year. But I don't see that happening, because I think he's going to have a great season.
Let me ask you, I guess, to that point before we get into our final question, is one thing that Bengals fans always complain about up into this past free agency was the lack of free agents being signed and brought into Cincinnati, right? And part of the reason why I think Ace and myself are reluctant to let these players get to the open market is because guaranteed money. And one of the things that I preach to people is about how it's a separate account where Bengals have to pony up the bucks. They can't pay them weekly. This is can you talk to the people about the difference in guaranteed money versus salaries? Yeah. Where and how it affects free agency big time. Where this past free agency, it didn't, because they actually went out and spent it. But there's a different way that the money is handled.
You got it. It's so when a free agent player is weighing different offers from teams, they're going to want to look at the overall dollars, of course, but really, because these contracts aren't guaranteed, they're going to look at what the dollars are that are guaranteed. And so the biggest way a player gets guaranteed money in the NFL is a signing bonus. And so that signing bonus is guaranteed at signing. Right. Now, there are ways that the team can, what they call claw back, or the player can forfeit their signing bonus if they have off the field issues, if they get a PED suspension for steroids or whatever the case may be, performance enhancing. There are ways. But other than that, even if the player bombs out but has no other issues, that signing bonus money is the guaranteed money. And so that's the biggest portion of the guarantee. The other ways money becomes guaranteed is teams can then say, okay, we'll give you a big $20 million signing bonus, but in addition to that, we're going to guarantee your base salary, whatever that amount is, for years 1, 2, and 3. And the better player that you are, the more leverage you have, the more years you can get guaranteed. Traditionally, historically, the Bengals don't do that. To your point, they don't guarantee base salary. The only true guarantee they give players is the signing bonus, saying, you sign this contract, here's your check. Literally. I mean, that bonus is earned at the time that the contract is signed. It may not all be paid out at the same time, but it's paid out usually within 12 months, if not all of it within a very short amount of time. And so that's the guaranteed money. The signing bonus is guaranteed. So let's use a real world example or a fake example. Let's say a player signs a 5-year, $80 million contract with $40 million guaranteed. So half of guaranteed. The player may play out all 5 years, in which case they get all $80 million. But if they're cut if they're cut any time before the contract is over, they're only going to get from that contract the amount that was guaranteed. So to use that example, 5 years, 80 million, 40 million guaranteed. That 40 million guaranteed is likely to be, let's call it a $20 million signing bonus. So that's half of your 40 guarantee. And then the other guarantee comes, the team will say, okay, you got $20 million that we're going to guarantee. We're going to guarantee that in the form of guaranteeing your base salaries for years 1, 2, and 3 of that 5-year deal. And years 1, 2, and 3, your base salary are going to add up to 20 million plus your 20 million signing bonus. That's how you get the 40 million guaranteed. Because if you don't offer, if you just give the player the signing bonus and don't offer the player any other guarantees, you can cut the player. Now you're going to eat all that signing bonus money, in which case there's dead money on the cap. And so that's a way to protect against that as a player. But the player and their agent wants to see the guarantee in writing. And it's a guarantee. It's an addendum to the contract. It says it's guaranteed. And there are 3 types of guarantees, not to get too far in the weeds, but it's guaranteed for injury, skill, and salary cap. Meaning that if the team has to cut you because you had an injury, but now you passed the physical, you're healthy, but the injury caused you to not play well, they can cut you for that. They can cut you for, hey, we need room to sign another player. We're just tight against the cap. We're going to cut you for cap purposes. Or we're going to cut you for skill. Like you're not injured and we don't need the cap room, but you're just not the player that you used to be. We're going to cut you. If you don't have guaranteed money left here, that's it. It's not like baseball. Like baseball, you cut a player, the team's got to eat that contract. You got to pay out that money. In football, if there's no guaranteed money left, the team can easily get out of the deal. So to answer your question, Zim, it's a great question. A lot of people, I think too, because like when you listen to like the NFL Network or ESPN or any other network that just states a contract, they're starting to do it now, though, I realize. They're starting to state the guarantee because that's what the players really want. It's literally the owners putting their money where their mouth is in the contract saying, if anything goes wrong, here's your true guarantee. Here's what you're entitled to get in this contract, even if we break it before it's over. And so the guarantees, the biggest form of the guarantee is always the signing bonus. And then it really takes the form of like the base salaries. Not to get too overly complicated, they can guarantee like off-season roster bonuses too. Like if you're on the roster, like the 5th day after the new league year, you'll get $1 million bonus. Like Bobby Hart, for example, had a roster bonus this year. But that wasn't guaranteed. So the Bengals could have cut him the day before and say, sorry, Bobby, you don't get that money. But they honored that, even though it wasn't a guaranteed roster bonus. To avoid, some players and their agents will say to the team, okay, that roster bonus is fine, but guarantee it. Put it in the contract that you're going to guarantee it for skill, injury, and cap. In case I get cut for any of those reasons, then you're still going to pay me. So the Bengals, even though they didn't guarantee that roster bonus, they still paid it out to Bobby Hart too, because he was on the roster. And so a lot of people tend to look at the overall dollars and years of the contract. And very rarely, as you guys know, do people end up seeing the whole, unless you're just like an elite player who stays healthy, God willing, the odds are you're going to be cut before the end of your deal. So the important part is, what is the amount that's guaranteed? And you guarantee it in the form of a signing bonus, and then guaranteed base salary, and then these guaranteed off-season roster bonuses are another common form.
So one question that I had, Andre, that I've always kind of wondered about in terms of the way the cap works is when it comes to trades. I know like last season we kind of talked about with us not doing so well, there was a point where we had a show where should the Bengals consider trading someone like a Geno Atkins or someone like a Carlos Dunlap? How do those trades work in terms of how salary is divvied up? Is it at a certain point in time? Is there any kind of difference, or how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So when you trade a player, the team that trades up, the trading team, the team that traded him, they have to account for any signing bonus money that has been paid out but has not been hit against that is not counted against the cap. And so they call that a cap acceleration. So to bring up a Geno Atkins trade, if the Bengals had traded Geno, I don't have his contract in front of me, but I don't know what his signing bonus was. But let's keep the number simple. Let's say it was a $10 million signing bonus. And the Bengals, you could prorate that over the length of the deal. It was a 4-year extension, plus he had 1 year added on. So it was $2 million in each of those 5 years. But there were 3 years left on. I think Geno has. Well, if they traded him last year, he would have had 3 years left on his deal. He would have had last year, and then I think Geno is still under contract for 2 more years, I think. Right. And so the Bengals then, upon trading him, the Bengals then have to. What comes back against the Bengals cap is all that signing bonus money that's been prorated, but that hasn't hit the Bengals cap yet. And the acquiring team is not on the hook for that. The only thing the acquiring team is on the hook for is the player's base salary. So it actually ends up being a good deal for the acquiring team because they're only paying the base salary. They're not paying any portion of the signing bonus because the signing bonus has already been paid out. But that's why, too, like if you get a really good player like Geno on a good deal where you're just paying his base salary and you acquire him via trade, the Bengals are going to want a lot of return for that. They're saying, hey, we're going to trade you this all-pro defensive tackle, Hall of Fame player, all-decade player.
At a discount rate, essentially.
That's right. Because you're the acquiring team in a trade, you don't pay any portion of the signing bonus. You just have to pay his base salary and any other guarantees that are remaining in the contract, but there are none because the Bengals don't do that.
Right.
And so because we're giving you a good player and you're paying just his base salaries for the next 3 years, you got to give us something good. You got to give us a second-round pick. You got to give us a third-round pick, a high third round, or a conditional third round that turns into a 2 if Geno makes 2 Pro Bowls or whatever the case may be. You can structure it many ways. Right. But that's the way. So the team that trades the player has to account what hits against their salary cap is any what they call unamortized signing bonus, any signing bonus that is not hit against the cap yet, that's been prorated out but not hit. So because when he's traded, the player is removed from the roster. It's just from a cap perspective, it's almost the same as cutting that player because he's no longer on the team. And so you have to accelerate all his bonus money that has not hit against the cap yet. But the team that acquires him doesn't count that money. They just count what they owe him via base salary the rest of the way. So it's a way for teams to acquire a player at a reasonable rate, at a discounted rate. But in order to do that, the team that's trading him away knows that. And so they use that as, okay, you got to give us something in return.
Gotcha.
Makes a lot of sense. People, we've had a great show tonight. I think we're running out of time currently right now. I wish I had a couple other things I wanted to ask you, but we'll save that for a later date. And I think it'll be really, really important. Please make sure you follow Andre at Andre Perrotta 13 on Twitter. Is there anything else that you got going that I can make the people see where you're like putting out some more information, or people can ask you questions directly as it pertains to like any salary stuff?
Yeah, I use Twitter for for all that stuff. So shoot me. My DMs aren't open, but if you follow me, I'll usually try to follow people back. I follow both of you guys because I like hearing different opinions from people. And any Bengals fan, I usually try to follow anyway, and especially knowledgeable fans like you guys. So. If you guys want, I'd love to be on again.
Hell yeah!
Definitely, man. You're the man.
Hell yeah! As we get closer to the season, I wanted to ask you some stuff about like player leverage, excuse me, and how it pertains to the current climate that we're in. No, but let's see how it plays out. But currently, right now, I think we got the groundwork to get us Mixon signed, get us AJ Green for $20 million. We know how much money we got, so they can't pull any wolves all over our eyes right now because we got the inside scoop on their cap figures. We know what the rate is, and we're ready to go. I thank you all for attending tonight. This has been the Orange is the New Black podcast with my man Ace Boogie. Please make sure you follow him at New Stripe City on Instagram, YouTube. Subscribe. If you subscribe to the YouTube, whatever, I promise you it's going to pay off for you later. You can always check me out at Zim_Hude on Instagram and Zimhude on Twitter. If you got any money questions, just send them all to Andre because I don't know stuff.
All right. This has been the show. Hude.
Thanks, guys.